Today's show is sponsored by MailTrap, modern email delivery for developers. The complete email API that does everything you need it to do. Try it today at mailtrap.io and get 20% off for all plans with the promo code CLOUDCAST. That's mailtrap.io, mailtrap.io.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I just got back and I'm almost recovered from a week in New York City. I got to meet new coworkers, talk to a bunch of customers, and most importantly, I had the privilege to attend DeepLearning.AI's AI Dev Day. It was a great crowd and a great event, and probably about, 1,500 plus AI enthusiasts. There was lots of great presentations and really lots of great conversations as well. Moving on to our podcast for this week. Our podcast this week is all about a term we've been hearing more and more, shadow AI. It's no secret that employees unknowingly or sometimes knowingly leak sensitive corporate data through generative AI tools like ChatGPT. And we're going to be talking about that and all of the implications, and all of that is coming up right after this quick break.
Self-driving cars, delivery drones, and fleets of automated mining machines have moved from headlines to habits, but they can only travel as fast as the tech underneath it. On Interconnected, a new show by Equinix that explores the hidden infrastructure behind our connected future, they shed light on the challenges of scaling safety, where computation happens, and a future where cities are built with autonomy in mind. MIT research scientist Brian Reimer and emerging technology leader Patrina Steele explain how the way we move is changing and where the future will take us. Listen on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Today's show is brought to you by TestCube. Testing applications in Kubernetes doesn't have to be complicated. TestCube is your go-to platform for cloud-native continuous testing. With TestCube, you can orchestrate, scale, and automate tests effortlessly right within Kubernetes, catching issues early and deploying with confidence. Try it out today and see why engineering teams trust TestCube to keep their testing simple and scalable. Your tests, your tools, your infrastructure, finally together. Check it out at testcube.io/cloudcast.
And we're back, and we have a topic today that actually we've been meaning to talk about for a little bit now, and actually Brian talked about on a Sunday Perspectives. I'll put a link to the show in the show notes previously, but we're going to be talking about shadow AI and the implications of it today. And for that, we have Rohan Sathe, co-founder and CEO at Nightfall AI. So first of all, welcome to the show, Rohan, and give everyone a brief introduction, and especially about your time at Uber Eats and kind of founding engineering at Uber Eats. Tell us a little bit about all of that.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to share. The Uber Eats story was interesting. When I joined Uber, I knew we'd have kind of the opportunity to build a business within a business. So at that point, it was still very much a small company, and we had built out this kind of ride-sharing platform. And we thought of that more as a logistics platform, where we weren't just delivering people to places, but we could also deliver other things like food, right? And so got a great opportunity to kind of start that Uber Eats business with a few engineering counterparts, and the rest is kind of history. It's a pretty massive business now, and we scaled that actually close to 10 billion in bookings before I left in just about 2 years. So phenomenal kind of ride.
Absolutely. Those are definitely the kind of rides that they're very hectic but very fun, kind of all at the same time. So let's talk about shadow AI. Let's kind of start at the beginning here. How would you define shadow AI?
Yeah, so the way I define shadow AI is, of course, there's been this rapid push from CEOs or boards amongst their kind of employee base to use and leverage as much AI as possible. We see all the benefits with, of course, things like ChatGPT already, but I think businesses feel like they can be a lot more productive, right? And so shadow AI is just this concept that your employees might be spinning up different AI tools or ways to use AI, and the organization may not know about that. And so what is the implication of that? Well, there's both a security and a compliance implication. The security implication is hey, somebody's taking my corporate data potentially and then sharing it with an AI application. And who knows, are they training with that data and improving their AI models with our corporate data? And that's not something that we've allowed them to do, right? And the compliance version of that also is like certain data just can't be shared with anyone, right? So if you're a healthcare company, you deal with protected health information. You can't just willy-nilly share your customers like social security numbers and stuff like that, right? So that's just the general concept of shadow AI.
Yeah. And maybe kind of a follow on how I've been thinking about this, because you hear shadow AI, and shadow AI is based off of the original shadow IT term back in the kind of the
Yeah.
start of cloud, right? And but I feel like this looks a little different, and here's why I think that, because the learning curve is much smaller. And what I mean is, like, for shadow IT to happen, you had to know IT. You had to know servers, and you had to know storage, and with shadow AI, I mean, it's kind of everywhere. And the reason why it's everywhere is because it's literally like, hey, if you know how to type, you can go use shadow AI, right? And so, like,
Yeah.
is that a correct way to think about the problem? It's like shadow IT on steroids?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's very similar. Perhaps the only difference is, as you mentioned, the adoption curve. The time for somebody to adopt an AI application is probably a lot smaller than it is just any generic IT application, right? So I think that's been one big piece. The second is there's an extreme push from CEOs or boards of companies for the employee base to use AI applications. So that push, though perhaps strong during kind of the era of cloud migrations and stuff like that, is probably not as strong as the push to using AI. And then the third is it's not just a browser or desktop based kind of mechanism, right? I can spin up agents myself. Now I can click a couple buttons. Now I've got these agents running, and like then it's just like programs doing things, right? And so and this is not happening with much user interactivity once you've set something up. So I think that that those are the big differences, I would say.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. And let me ask you this then too, because maybe let's quantify it a little bit, because it sounds scary, but like, how big is this shadow AI problem today? Like in your view, like I've seen some sometimes alarming stats, but you also don't know, like, oh, okay, well, how much of those stats are like clickbaity headlines or whatever, right? But considering Gen AI is like only a few years old, I feel like it's probably a considerable portion of, like, if we go talk about data leaks, which is what we're going to be talking about here in a little while, like when it comes to data loss prevention, DLP, right? Did it just skyrocket up the charts when it came to the, how much leakage was potentially happening and how big of a problem this became quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I think just if you just look at the growth rates of even ChatGPT back in 2024, right? I mean, they were seeing like consumer level kind of growth rates for like hot companies, like when Facebook had launched or even Uber had launched, right? And so um, I think because of that, because of all the consumer mind share that's, easily spread to the enterprise, right? So I do think the problem is very pervasive. And we see that because as a data loss prevention company, like we see the hard data around usage of AI applications in an enterprise. And so that also has dramatically skyrocketed. And I would say at this point, you probably have 80+% of the employee base using some form of AI. And so the question is like, does the enterprise have good control on it?
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a little while, because like we mentioned DLP, so data loss prevention,
Yeah.
hardware, software, and systems. And I will say this, like I've had some history behind it with some of the more traditional systems back in the day. And
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. In my experience, those tools were super cumbersome, super clunky, and like
Yeah.
you had this classic trade-off of like, hey, we're going to lock down the user. Like IT's going to, like, is basically was like this whole idea of like, hey, user productivity versus security, and we're just going to lock you down really, really hard.
Yeah.
And twofold question, like, how has that mindset changed in the era of AI?
Yeah.
But also, too, your company was using AI prior to OpenAI and
Yeah.
Gen AI, right? And so, like, almost maybe like a twofold question. Like, what was your concept back in, I think it was 2018, 2019, when you were thinking about starting the company?
Yeah.
And then did that mindset change when everything
Yeah.
kind of hit in 2022 and 2023?
Yeah, for sure. And we've had to stay abreast of all of the rapid kind of changes in AI, and we continue to do so. But just some of the backstory of DLP. So the problems kind of, or DLP really originates from this idea at Bank of America, I think is like the classic example where you had internal employees stealing credit card numbers of their customers and doing nefarious things with those, right? And so back then the use case was, hey, everything is in our own data centers, so like let's deploy some software on our servers or on our employees workstations, monitor if they're taking cardholder information and leaving with it, right? And there are only a few ways to leave with data at that point. It was like I could stick a thumb drive in my workstation, I could use a browser maybe, right? Or I could email it to myself. And so a couple of things have changed. So one is, back then, the detection of what was sensitive was very limited to rules. So like I would write a rule that says a credit card number is like 16 to 19 digits. It always has these certain prefixes. It passes some algorithm when you run a checksum on it. And that's how you identified what a credit card number was, right? Unfortunately, the problem with these rules-based kind of methods is that they're super noisy, because it turns out if you're just scanning anything that's 16 digits and has some prefixes, like a lot of stuff actually just passes that and is not a credit card number, right? And so DLP had gotten a very bad rap of being super, super noisy because it was just rules-based. The big transformation that happened, and no pun intended, was just the Google kind of transformer paper that talked about sort of new techniques towards solving natural language problems, right? And so that's kind of the idea that we leverage to say, hey, you can get a lot better about classifying data using NLP. And the reason why my experience is relevant there was, even back in 2015, like Uber was at the kind of cutting edge of leveraging machine learning and doing that at scale. And so this was a great opportunity for me to leverage that expertise to solve a different problem in a different domain. You asked a question about how have things changed with LLMs. The only difference has been the technology's just gotten even better. So like we had kind of transformer-based architectures that were still very good, but not as good as large language models. And so that's the only thing that has adapted, is like, okay, now we can leverage something even more sophisticated in the way we do detection. So that's kind of been the biggest thing.
Yeah. And I know I've talked about this a number of times recently on the show, but I kind of see a lot of these things we've been talking about. I see two sides, right? It becomes this cat and mouse game of like, okay, there's the on the front side, there's the users, and then like you were saying, an employee goes and signs up for ChatGPT, uploads a bunch of documents, and then does it. What they think is like, hey, I'm just going to use this to make my job easier, make it faster, make this document better. But oh, by the way, that's really sensitive data that they shouldn't have been uploading. But then on the back end, you're using AI to kind of this large amount of detecting signals from noise, and the bigger the environment, the more noise. And so you kind of have this like one versus the other, and one side leading to potential losses, the other side trying to prevent it. And is it as simple as it's a cat and mouse game? Or, and also like what happens when like AI-powered attacks meet AI-powered defense, right? At what point does it just kind of get like AI everywhere and it's just the AIs fighting each other kind of thing? Like, tell me a little bit about like the thought approach, if you will, to all of this, right?
And I mean, I think in general, security, even outside of data loss prevention, like even just like antivirus or something, is very much a cat and mouse type of thing. That's just a general kind of security challenge. So you have to stay kind of up to date with newer threats, right, and adapt software to accommodate for preventing those kinds of things. And so, I think luckily with data loss prevention, most of the incidents are actually just poor hygiene. So it's not like the user who's using ChatGPT is like deliberately trying to share sensitive data to get past a control. They just don't realize the implication of sharing your financials with OpenAI or whoever, right? And so it's more of an education thing ultimately for that use case, where it's just like poor hygiene. And it's like, how do we just make sure our employees operate with the right hygiene and educate them to the right kind of places to use AI? But you're right, like there's this kind of meta idea of like now Nightfall is an AI product, so we're kind of fighting people from using AI, and we're also going to apply that to AI agents. So then we're really an AI kind of fighting an AI, which is very meta. But yes, I think that's the world we're going to. So
That's right. That's right. So let's dig into kind of the more practical aspects of all of this then. So let's
sure,
kind of do maybe a bit of our architecture on all of this. Like
yeah,
how does this work across, say, like SaaS points and endpoints and browsers and AI tools?
yeah,
Because like I know, like again, going back to my old DLP days, like hey, there'd be like a client that ran on your desktop, and like if you tried to
yeah,
plug something in, it blocked it, or if you tried to
yeah.
email something, it like flagged it, or like how are you tracking things increasingly when a lot of things are SaaS based, a lot of things are browser based.
Yeah.
It's not like you have my laptop running necessarily a lot of apps anymore. I'm doing just about everything in a browser. And so like,
Right.
how do you begin to detect things? How do you remediate things? Like, explain to everyone how the pieces all fit together.
Sure. Yeah. So at the core of it, there's this idea of exfiltration vectors. So these are the places where data can leave the environment, right? So the things that traditional DLP had kind of focused on were things like USBs or somebody printing sensitive data. I mean, who really does that anymore? But those would be kind of the ways of the past. Now, as you mentioned, people are primarily using SaaS applications. They're using their browsers. They're emailing stuff through email clients. So the idea is we need to make sure we have coverage in the most common places folks may be exfiltrating sensitive data. And to do that, we need to insert ourselves both at the SaaS application layer. So we have API-based integrations to common SaaS applications that an organization might use, like Office 365, Slack, Google Drive, stuff like that. But we also need to sit on an employee's workstation. So we've got software running on the workstation, and that's what's monitoring for any data exfiltration. So the places we have controls on are SaaS applications and endpoint devices, and that gives us full visibility into what's happening in the SaaS application, and what's happening on somebody's workstation.
Got you. And this may be an antiquated question, but from a architecture standpoint, then where does the AI and AI processing piece fit in? Is it in like it's in real time analyzing everything and it's flagging things, or is it more like I go back to my old days of like, is it signature based and you got to update the signatures on the endpoints, or like how does it know? Like because it's not, or at least I don't know this. I'll ask the question. Like, is it a small LM running locally, or like how do you handle where things run and get processed?
Yeah, so most of our processing, we have pre-processing and then after pre-processing, just the rest of the processing, right? So most of the general processing happens in our cloud. So we're a cloud-based SaaS service, right? So we are hosting models in our own cloud infrastructure, and that's where we're doing inference on, hey, we saw this metadata, like this looks like it's sensitive, or this looks like it is exfiltration and not just a standard business workflow, for example. So most of that is happening in our cloud. We do some pre-processing, so that some of that pre-processing is in our cloud as well as on the endpoints themselves. So we may say, hey, like we pre-process some data and like we actually don't need to send it up to our cloud because we know it's like either just a business workflow or something that is not sensitive. So
Gotcha. That's fantastic. Now, let's kind of flip over and kind of maybe talk a little business and culture for a second.
sure.
I know that you've mentioned that in the past, like shadow AI isn't just a technical problem; it's a behavioral and organizational challenge as well. And I really like that. So, like, what's your advice for CISOs, CIOs, security leaders, CDOs? There's so many C-level acronyms out there. It's an alphabet soup these days. But like, when folks are trying to manage this, but also strike that fine balance between user productivity and security.
Yeah, I mean, the first step is I think you can really be in kind of a monitoring only mode, right? So firstly, you just need to establish a program. Like, are there a set of AI applications that are authorized by the organization that we must direct people to, or do we have the stance that people can use whatever as long as we have some visibility and are able to have some sort of agreements with those companies that they can't share, that they can't train on our data, right? So that's kind of step one is like, what is the program? What are the AI tools in use? And to validate that, you can use our software, shameless plug, or you can use, other tools. But I think the idea is you want to get some sense of like, what is the landscape of AI applications that are in use today, right? And based on the policy that you have internally and what the data is showing, then you can start to put in controls, both in terms of preventing people from using certain applications, or at least monitoring when they're sharing sensitive data to those applications, and then coaching them on, hey, this is redirecting them to the right places to use AI, or hey, like you can share data, just don't share this type of data. And here's like our policy on that. So
Sure. Well, and let me kind of a random bring it back around to something you said earlier in the show. Though you said something about like, okay, shadow AI can potentially get pretty bad in the agentic realm as well, because now it's not just you doing things, but agents doing things on your behalf. And so, as we kind of in the industry kind of, I won't say shifts, but adopts, in addition to Gen AI, this whole idea of agentic AI, like how does that impact the thinking, and how does that impact the consumption patterns as you go from kind of one technology to the other? Because agentic AI almost seems like it takes the problem and makes it exponentially worse at times, or
yeah.
has the potential to, right? So how do you think about that, Rohan?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I think the the ease of spinning up agents too, and just the distribution capability has made the problem even more pervasive. So an example of this would just be like, we had a customer, for example, that was in healthcare. They were recording all of their, customer support calls. Those were getting transcribed. So they had an agent that was, taking the transcription and then, running that against some sort of LLM to do some analysis. Now all of a sudden you've taken a very sensitive customer interaction that contains sensitive PII or PHI and fed it to a model, right? And the employee that set this up was just trying to do something good. Like they weren't doing something malicious, right? They just wanted to set up a workflow that they were probably running manually and just improve that through automation. And so the fact that somebody can easily do this where they don't really have to even know how to code because they're just clicking buttons just means that data can move from place to place without you even realizing. And that's not it's not as simple as just like me normally having some human interaction with my browser or something like that. It's just like I click some buttons and then magic is happening kind of in somebody else's cloud, right? So I think that's kind of the new surface area that just needs focus and attention and coverage. And Nightfall can help with that, but I'm sure others can as well.
Yeah, and help me out a little bit too with it, because like, what is the most common agentic platforms that you're seeing the most adoption with right now, and
Yeah.
what are some of the kind of the use cases that you're seeing that you're like, hey, this is acceptable or this is bad? Like, tell me a little bit more about how folks are using it, and then you're potentially allowing it or preventing it.
Am I going to get some sponsorship money for the plugs here? No, I'm
Nope.
just kidding. But
There you go. There you
I
go.
would say I think the ones we're seeing is we're seeing N8N for sure. OpenAI has this like bot builder agent kit, right? So that those are the ones that I primarily see. I mean, at this point, we can probably assume that any foundational model company is going to have some form or flavor of just creating agents super easily. So I would expect, the classic kind of names, Anthropic or whatever, to have something that folks should kind of be privy to. So
Makes sense. No, I appreciate it. So, final question to kind of close this out. If anyone out there is interested, what's the best way they could get started? Maybe they want to reach out to you, or if you're going to be, speaking anywhere, or tell me
yeah.
a little bit about what you got coming up, or if anyone wants to get hold of you or dig into Nightfall more.
there's a lot of stuff we have on the product roadmap that's going to be coming out here shortly, kind of increasing some of the coverage and capabilities that we have with Shadow AI. But folks can reach out to me at just first name Rohan at nightfall.ai, or just go on our website, ask for a demo, and our team's on that pretty quickly. So there's a couple ways to get to us.
Fantastic. Very much appreciate your time this week, Rohan. And for everyone out there, thank you for listening. We certainly appreciate you listening as well. And if you enjoy the show, please leave us a review if you can, wherever you get your podcasts. And please tell a friend as well. And as always, we're looking for feedback, show@thecloudcast.net. On behalf of Brian, who wasn't able to make it this week, and myself, everyone out there, thank you very much for listening. And we will talk to everyone next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.